Hello, I'm Brad Tolinsky with BackStory Events and Parade Magazine, and we're here speaking to one of the giants of jazz music, Chick Corea. He's going to be the recipient of the American Eagle Award. This is a great award honoring musicians that have made significant contributions to our culture. And people like Benny Goodman and Dizzy Gillespie have been past recipients.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I didn't know Dizzy was. Benny Goodman.
Yeah. So I was sort of wondering, what does it mean receiving this kind of award to you?
Well, I take it as an opportunity to spread the word, because I know that the American Eagle Awards has an intention to put music in public schools, for instance, to spread the use of music. Also, I read that they have advocacy to protect musicians' rights and so forth. But that's what I like to do. I like to spread the idea that musicians and artists are sort of a team that tacitly, without talking about it too much, promote freedom of expression, promote freedom to be the way you want to be, freedom to using your imagination and being yourself, and all of that is very, very good stuff as far as I'm concerned. So I feel like I took the opportunity. I'm happy to be acknowledged, of course, but I think maybe if it spreads the word, I'm happy to help.
That sort of leads into my next question. What do you think is the importance of jazz music going into the 21st century, and I should say improvised music?
Well, by this point, and from my view now, after a lifetime of music and traveling around the world, the importance of categorizing music is very small. Jazz, classical, it doesn't matter what. The idea is that within the basic nature of every human being is the aesthetic spirit. The imagination is there. You want to create beauty and you want to appreciate beauty, and if that comes out of course, that comes out in art forms, not just music and dance and literature, but also in a housewife's job of setting up a household and putting a beautiful table together and a clean house and raising a family. I mean, it's all aesthetics, yes, and it's basic nature to all of us. So that I feel is the importance. Of course, this improvisational spirit is captured by the jazz musician, but not only the jazz musician now. I mean, there's a lot of the jazz musician now, for instance, is kind of an international phenomenon. You can go to Colombia, South America, and you'll see the Colombian jazz musicians. Cuba, the Cuban jazz musicians. Chinese jazz musicians now are beginning to be more and more. Japanese jazz musicians for a long time, all over Europe. So the jazz idea is the idea of creating something new, or combining forms, and using improvisation. But there's no really limits to it, and there's no ways to make a rule saying this is jazz or that's jazz anymore. It's just the creative spirit to improvise and to make new music. Because jazz musicians compose too. I'm a composer as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge fan of jazz and many other music forms, like you're saying. And even though that I do hear what you're saying, and that jazz is sort of, spreading in all sorts of really interesting different ways throughout different countries and different places, I still know that a lot of people, when they hear that term, they're just used to getting their pop music or their, but maybe they're interested. So I have a question that I don't mean to say what is the greatest or any of that stuff, but if there was one song that you felt captured the joy, the spirit of jazz, just to recommend to somebody who hasn't really listened to the music, is there something you could think of?
Of course, I would be very reluctant though to encourage people by naming one song, and what I would do though is name artists, because in the lineage of jazz, since 1900 anyway, you have Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington, who really were the forefront of the first half of the 20th century. But then Miles Davis came on the scene as a young man in 1947, playing with Charlie Parker, who, by the way, together with Thelonious Monk and Dizzy Gillespie, changed the face of music. Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk. So then Miles picked up that culture and developed a lifetime of incredible great musical forms. So my suggestion would be, in this day and age, Google Miles Davis, listen to anything by him. Actually, his most popular recording is called Kind of Blue, and that would be a great beginning. Actually, I often recommend that album as an introduction to someone who isn't familiar with jazz history.
What's sort of deeply brilliant about that record, I mean, it could go on forever, but I always say it's something that you could listen to very actively and go way deep into it, but you can also just put it on as beautiful music that in the background, that could be part of the fabric of your everyday life.
Absolutely. There's simple themes and great improvisations on the themes by the greatest musicians of the era. So it's just a great piece of music.
You're also the Manhattan Transfer are also getting award along with you,
yes. And
I know that you've worked with them in the past. They did that great record several years ago where they did songs from Chicks. They took songs from your songbook and did a brilliant job. And I think you played on the record as well. What could you tell people about what makes the Manhattan Transfer great?
Well, Tim Hauser and Janice Siegel, they're kind of I think they're the founders. I know Tim was one of the first ones, and I think Janice was, and I've known them since the day. I always sometimes reminisce with Stanley Clarke that when Return to Forever in 1973, the electric version of Return to Forever played a date at the Showboat in Philadelphia. We walked into the club, and there was this vocal group on doing a sound check. We thought, what's this vocal group doing on our stage? And it was the first time we had met the Manhattan Transfer. They've created a lifetime of great entertainment and great music. I love all those guys.
So what can you tell us about what you're working on currently? I know you're always working on some new music. What's coming up?
Well, I got a whole bunch of things happening. One thing I'm doing is I'm actually making a documentary on jazz, from my viewpoint. It's sort of my life in jazz, together with gathering together my friends. Like we just met Hubert Laws coming in here, Herbie Hancock. Bobby McFerrin, some of the younger guys I work with, Christian McBride and Brian Blade, and I want to present the history of jazz starting from 1947 when Miles entered the scene, because Ken Burns did a documentary years ago that took the history of jazz up to 1947. So that's one of the projects I'm excited to work on, and I have several. What are we doing? We're going out on tour this month in July with Dave Weckl on drums and John Patitucci on bass. That's one of my earlier trios, and we put our repertoire back together with some new music. We're doing that. Then I have a young trio that I'm touring with in the fall, consisting of a young Cuban bassist named Carlitos Del Puerto, and my favorite young drummer, Marcus Gilmore, who was Roy Haynes' grandson, actually. And we have a trio called Vigilette, and it's a completely separate repertoire. And then there's the Detroit Jazz Festival this year, where I'm the artist in residence, and I'm going to perform.
My hometown.
Your hometown. Oh, cool. Detroit. Yay. Yay, Detroit.
Baker's Keyboard.
Baker's Keyboard Lounge. That's right. So I'm going to perform there with the acoustic band trio, with my electric band, and then the third night with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, performing my version of Concerto d'Aranjuez plus my Spain for orchestra and sextet. And then lots of solo concerts and trilogies coming together next year with Brian Blade and Christian McBride, and a lot of stuff.
So it sort of ties into all of this. I mean, it must be gratifying to you to be able to sort of pass the torch on to these younger players. But I'm curious, what do finding these younger players bring to you, bring to your music?
Oh, it's a complete passion of mine to do that, to help musicians. But you know, the age and experience level of anyone, I think, it's one thing to look at, but it can be a red herring, you know, because it doesn't matter the age of an artist. I'm as inspired by the young artist as ever, and they're everywhere, and that's something that you don't read in the newspapers. But great art is happening by great musicians, very young musicians trying new things and so forth, and they're everywhere. And I like to help them as I can. I have an effort called Chick Corea Music Workshops, where it's an online program where I sort of make myself available to musicians. They ask questions, I try to tell them my experience and so forth.
Well, I'd like to thank Chick Corea for, even on a personal level, for a lifetime of great music and personal enjoyment. And Chick mentioned Miles Davis as somebody that you want to go out and listen to, but I would recommend any Chick Corea record as well. Thank you once again, and congratulations on winning the American Eagle Award.
Okay, Brad, thank you, man.
Okay, thank you.
Nice talking to you. All right.